Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Pennsylvania Senate election, and when I mean a deep dive, I mean a deep dive. We're going to be analyzing county by county, region by region. We're going to be looking at demographics, past election results, and close, localized election results. We're going to be getting really into the nitty-gritty of it all, and I'm going to show you right here, right now, why I believe Dr. Oz will become the next senator for the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. If you look at his campaign, where his campaign is doing well in, and how his campaign is being run, I guess you could say trends of the state is clearly showing that Dr. Oz is probably going to pull off a narrow victory. Is it possible he loses? Yes, but based on his campaign, based on how he's polling, and based on the nitty-gritty results, and when you really look at the localized level and past election results, it is clear that Dr. Oz does have a slim advantage as of now. We're going to start over here in the western part of Pennsylvania, where I believe that John Fetterman is probably going to do pretty well in. For those of you who do not know, John Fetterman is the former mayor of Braddock. It's a small, pretty unionized county. Not unionized, pretty working-class county. It has a sizable African-American population. It's near Pittsburgh, and it's located in Allegheny County. Allegheny County voted for Joe Biden by about 60% to 40%, so it's a pretty solidly Democratic area. Biden won it by about 20 points. It shifted about 4 points to the right, which is pretty much the national environment, so not a huge surprise there. It's pretty much stayed stagnant, and Trump did have a lot of appeal there in 2016. It shifted pretty sizably to Donald Trump. He did very well in this part of the state, not just Allegheny County, but Beaver County, Butler County, Westmoreland County, Washington County, Fayette County, Greene County, a lot of the Mercer County. A lot of these counties that I'm kind of going over right here near the Ohio-West Virginia border are very working-class counties, very white working-class counties. These are areas that have, this is where the steel and mining industry used to thrive, and they usually voted Democratic because of the union. Democrats are the party of the unions. Now that those unions have started to fade away, Democrats have gone further left on social issues, and Republicans have gotten a little bit more populist. And Trump's appeal, his economic platform is very appealing to these voters, and him just being an outsider and willing to take on China and try to bring their jobs back. This is a part of the Rust Belt that Trump did very well in, and is continuing to trend Republican. That said, we may see a little bit of a trend backwards, as John Fetterman is actually doing very well with these types of voters, and Oz really isn't. I mean, Oz doesn't have a whole lot of appeal to these types of voters. I mean, Fetterman, like him or not, he is from this part of the state. He does wear a hoodie. He does walk around. He does make these big grandstands about supporting the union way of life. Well, Oz is some multimillionaire from Philadelphia, so a lot of these voters are pretty turned off by Oz. I'm not saying that Oz is going to lose these counties, but I do think in the end, John Fetterman probably does pretty well here. So we're going to start by shifting Allegheny County and its surrounding counties, whether it be Beaver, Washington, Westmoreland, Butler, Mercer, and Lawrence. We're all going to shift about 2 points to the left. I think Oz does. I think Oz does. I don't think he loses these counties, but I do think that Fetterman does a little bit better than Trump did in these counties, or a little bit better than Biden did. Excuse me. So we're going to shift these counties 2 points to the left. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be a huge shift, but I do think Fetterman will do better in this part of the state than people expect. Meanwhile, the base, which is the more the T part of the state, more central and southern part of the state. So Pennsylvania is kind of divided into the T section. A lot of these southern counties, as you can see here, are very deep red. This means that they are overwhelmingly Republican leaning. They kind of go up into a T shape, kind of spread out at the top, and start from the bottom. Other than this county here, which is home to Penn State University, kind of throws a wrench in that. But the rest of the state, as you can see here, there's kind of like a T, which is pretty much where the Republican Party does best in. This is an area that shifted pretty much back and forth. A couple counties took huge shift to the left. A couple of counties took small shift to the right. So, but overall, I do think that John Fetterman does about a point better in these counties. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth with these. They're going to vote overwhelmingly for the Republicans. It's just I think Fetterman does about a point better than Biden in some of these here. Not like I said, not a huge noticeable shift, but still a shift nonetheless. So a lot of these solid red counties, we are going to shift about 2 points to John Fetterman. And that's going to put him at about 1.7 lead. Like I said here, a lot of these counties still vote for Oz by like 79 to 20, 75 24, but still they're not the huge victory that Trump got in these counties. You can see here he got like 79, 74, 71. He got 85 in Fulton. I think in this one he only gets 80. Yeah, like I said, there's not really a huge shift. It does shift to the Democrats, but I think it's just such a small shift that it's barely going to be noticeable, but it is going to be there. So the first county you're really going to look at is Erie County. This is a county that voted for Joe Biden very narrowly by about 2,000 votes, but it did vote for Trump in 2016 and shifted about 2 points to the left. Erie County is a pretty suburban county in terms of sorry, we're in completely different county. Ignore this. Erie County is a pretty suburban county. It's pretty. It has or the urban area is pretty African American and votes pretty Democratic, while the suburbs and rural areas tend to vote a little bit more Republican. As you can see here, we look at race and ethnicity in Erie County. As you can see here, it's very white. The deeper the red, the whiter the area. So a lot of Erie County, even the suburbs like Summit Township, McKean Township, Mill Creek Township, this is still 91% white. Fairview is 96% white. Come over here and look closer. As you can see here, Mill Creek, which we looked at, did vote pretty narrowly for Joe Biden. Biden won the Mill Creek area by about 5 points, 1 point, 3 points, and it shifted pretty heavily to the left. Biden made huge gains in the Fairview, Mill Creek part of the county. So sort of this part here, Mill Creek and Fairview, Joe Biden did very well in 2020. But these are more, I guess you could say, suburban voters. These are the suburbs of Erie. They're a little bit more college educated, as you're going to see here in a second, but they are still very white. And this is the voter that Oz is going to do best, and the more, I guess you could say, moderate, the more moderate swing voters in the suburbs are voters that Oz is going to do very well with, just because of, well, who he is. The same area I just showed you. If you come down here, look at track, as you can see here, we're going to go to voters with high school diploma or equivalent. As you can see, it's a lot of the rural areas, a lot of the areas that are going to vote heavily Republican. These areas are going to turn out pretty heavily for Oz. Fetterman may make small gains, but not going to be anything crazy. Since Oz got the Trump endorsement, he's going to do very well here. So as you can see here, Erie County, West Mill Creek, and Fairview. These are areas that voted, I guess you could say lean. They swung heavily to Joe Biden, although Fairview did technically vote very narrowly for Trump. But they took a huge shift to the left. As you can see here, I don't think that's going to continue. Fairview, look at this. These are very college-educated voters. We look at bachelor's degree. Pretty much, this is the most people here have a bachelor's degree. They're college-educated. Some people have masters, professional degree, doctorate degree. This is a pretty well-educated county, but it's also, as we saw earlier, pretty white. And did take a huge shift to the left, but they do tend to vote Republican on most levels. I mean, they still very narrowly voted Republican in a lot of these areas. So I think Oz is going to do very well among these types of voters, the more suburban, college-educated voters. I think it's going to be Oz's strong suit, because Oz does have that more moderate edge. He is very well known. He is running a pretty decent campaign to appeal to these voters, and these are voters that are very simply, they're just anti-Trump voters. They're still Republicans. They're still independents. They just didn't like Trump. They voted for Biden because he was, like, I guess, a return to normalcy. Now that's kind of out of the way. The economy is beginning to do pretty poorly. Pennsylvania's been hit pretty hard by inflation. I see no reason these voters are going to keep voting for Democrats, especially one like John Fetterman, who really John Fetterman is running a campaign to appeal to the Trumpian base. He's not running a campaign to hold on to these suburbs like we're going to see in Erie and we're really going to see in Philadelphia. So because of that, I think that Oz does flip back Erie County, probably by about 2 points or so, maybe. I don't know. Put R plus 2. So Oz does narrowly win back Erie County. I don't think he wins it back by a huge margin, but he certainly does win it back. As you can see here, so Oz is still going to do well in the more Republican-leaning parts. Will also make up ground in the suburbs. Like I said, look at this here. These are areas that shifted pretty heavily to Joe Biden. But John Fetterman is not a good candidate for this part of the state. Like I said, these are more moderate suburban voters, and John Fetterman just is not a good candidate for them. While Dr. Oz is running a pretty solid, good campaign, whether it be inflation or crime. These are voters that are going to vote for Oz. I don't think they're going to vote like hugely for Oz, but they're going to certainly turn out for him more than Fetterman. And I think Oz is going to win back a lot of these suburbs of Erie and allow him to flip the county into his column. Now we're going to look at Center County. Not a whole lot to say here. This is home to Penn State University. It's a lean Democrat county. Democrats traditionally win the county, although a few times. Pat Toomey, the former senator back in 2016, he did win this county very narrowly. He's a Republican. He's a little bit more moderate, I guess. He's not all that moderate, but he still is a pretty good, slightly more moderate, and he did manage to win this county. This county only voted for Joe Biden by about 5 points, and shifted about 2 points to the left. It's a pretty, I guess you'd say, center-left county, pretty moderate-leaning county. As you can see here, Center County is pretty much right in the middle of the state, and if we look closer, it is pretty Republican-leaning, except for State College, which is where the majority of the population lives, Penn State University. Biden plus 28, and Penn State took a huge shift to the left. As we know, colleges traditionally vote very Democratic, and of course, we're not getting the demographic statistical atlas is of course not loading. Do apologize for that. We'll have to load it up again, I guess. So, like I said, yeah, Center County is a pretty moderate county, pretty lean Democratic county. I think Oz is a little bit better there, not great. But like I said, I think it is better than Trump there. I think Fetterman still wins it. Probably only by about 2, though. So, statistical Atlas. So, like I said, I do think Oz does win this county, or Fetterman wins this county, excuse me. But Oz does do a little bit better there, because like I said, these are just anti-Trump voters turning out heavily in the Penn State area, and the rules of the county are still pretty Republican leaning. I think Oz will still do pretty well there. So we're gonna come over here and go to the Philadelphia area. We're gonna start we're gonna start here in Dauphin County. This is a county that is more, I guess you could say, more moderate. It's home to Harrisburg. It's the capital of Pennsylvania, and it's a county that traditionally votes Democratic, but not very much so. Come down here, as you can see, if we look at the race and ethnicity of the county, it is very white, at least the northern parts. So this county is really weird because a lot of the northern parts of Dauphin County are very white, and as you're going to see here, they vote very Democratic. You can see the outline up here. You can see the track here. See, this is like the long like pincer thing, and you can see it kind of here as well. These are counties that are overwhelmingly white, with pretty much all farmers or rural areas, and they vote overwhelmingly Republican. Like Trump was 53, Trump was 50. Coming in here, look at Harrisburg, the city itself. It's pretty Democratic. It outweighs this area. It's a little bit less white. It's a lot more black and Hispanic, which an interesting to note is how Trump made gains here. If you look at the Hispanic population of this county, Hispanics, they live in what? Kind of like the southern, a lot of Hispanics live in the southern part of Harrisburg, kind of near the river. Look where Trump made huge gains in. The southern part of Harrisburg, kind of by the river. And the other thing is a lot of polls have Oz doing very well with Hispanics. I do think that Oz is going to make gains. I'm not sure he's going to win Hispanics, but I do think he will make gains with them. And as you can see, Trump did pretty well with Hispanics in Harrisburg already. I think if they continue to shift to the right and the suburbs, like I said, like see the Harrisburg suburbs, you can see here, took a huge shift to the left. And I think similar to Erie County, is Oz is going to do pretty well there among these voters. You can see here, they are pretty white still, 80% white, 82% white. Coming here and look at educational attainment, I think Oz is going to do very well among these voters. So like I said, look, all these people have secondary degrees. This is a very college-educated county. Like I said, a lot of the northern part of the county where Trump did very well is more white working class, while a lot of the voters in the suburbs are more college-educated. They're more moderate, more independent, and they took a huge shift to the left. And Fetterman just doesn't have that appeal. Oz isn't this big, boisterous, not for lack of a better word, annoying figure like Trump is. And it's kind of the opposite. If anything, Oz kind of just sitting there and Fetterman's yelling about him being from New Jersey. I just don't think Fetterman has the appeal to these types of voters. And because of that, I do think that Dauphin County does take a shift to the right. I don't think it's going to be a huge shift, but I do think it does shift to the right because Oz is going to do better with Hispanics, and he's also going to do better in the suburbs. Like I said, I don't think he wins it, but I do think he does a lot better there. Maybe even gets it closer to about a 4-point win or so, about a 3.8 victory here. So Oz does do a lot better in Dauphin County. Now we'll come over here and look at the Philadelphia area. This is an area where, as you can see here, it voted pretty Democratic. All of Philadelphia did. And if you look at the swing, the suburbs of Philadelphia voted very Democratic. Inner city Philadelphia, a lot of Hispanic areas shifted heavily to the right. But like I said, a lot of the more suburban parts of Philadelphia did shift to the left. So if we come over here, look at the demographics of this area. Let's look at the Philadelphia metro. Actually, we don't want this because we don't care about the New Jersey part of it. We'll start in, let's do Bucks County. This is a county that is kind of like I guess you could say, it goes back and forth every cycle. Biden carried it by about 3 points. It shifted about 3 points to the left. It's always a very competitive county. It traditionally votes more Republican. However, as Democrats have done better with college-educated voters and done better in the suburbs, it's gotten a little bit more Democratic. It voted against Trump in 2020, and I'm not quite sure about 2016. I think Trump won it in 2016, although it was very narrow. Look that up, actually. Bucks County. All right, we're going to Bucks County, Pennsylvania. You can see here, it's a suburb of Philadelphia. It's very highly populated, and this is the county Oz is from. Did Trump win it in 2020? I believe he did. No, he did not. Okay, so Trump narrowly lost it in 2016, by about like 3,000 votes. So I was gonna say I thought he won it, but I also didn't think he did either. So Trump did not win this county, but it is still a very narrow county. It only shifted a few points to the left, despite being very suburban. If we look at it, let's look at race and ethnicity, and look what we're gonna see. It's about 85% white. That's good for Dr. Oz. Oz is going to do very well among white suburbanites. Look at this. It's pretty much all white. Even some of the areas that, as you can see, let's go Bucks. Zoom out. Here's Bucks County, the northern part of it here, and even some of the central parts of it here, which is still very white. Even come down to sort of like the little tip, as you can see here. Let's see, zoom out. This is all very white area, other than really Doylestown, which is still pretty white overall. And these are the areas that took heavy shift to the left. These are very, and I mean very, suburban areas. They're very suburban. As you're going to see here, they're pretty college educated and they're pretty white. So you can see here, all the deep red areas are very white areas. They're like 96% white, 91% white, 89% white, 91% white. Look at educational attainment. This thing would load. Bum, bum, bum. Come on, bruh. All right, so it's we'll wait for a second for it to load. But as you can see here, these are areas that are, they're pretty much by Trump plus 7, Biden plus 6, Biden plus 9. These are all pretty swingy areas, and they shifted heavily to the left. And I think that Oz is going to make gains here. Oz is from Bucks County. He's been campaigning a lot in Bucks County, the Bucks County and Philadelphia market as a whole. Oz has been really making a play for. And I do think that he does do a lot better in Philadelphia, at least the suburbs, than Trump did. Chester County and Montgomery County, these are very Democratic-leaning counties. They're very suburban, but they do still have a sizable white population and a sizable suburban population. I do think that Oz is better in these counties. I think he shifts them both about 3 points to the right or so. Probably also this county here, and probably Philadelphia as well. I think because Trump made gains. Actually, Trump made gains there. I think all these counties shift about 3 points to the right. Pretty much, so the kind of the gains that Fetterman got in the white working class parts of near Pittsburgh, just because of where he's from, where he's campaigning. I think we get the same thing in this part of the state as well, only for Oz. And this thing's not going to load, is it? Come on. I just want to look at the educational attainment. All right, it's really not going to load. That's really annoying, actually, because we're just going to screw this thing, I guess, because it keeps malfunctioning on me. That's normally a good metric. We've been using it a lot, but I know a lot about these counties already, so I can just kind of talk, I guess. Might make the video go by a little bit faster. So we're going to come up here and look at Northampton County. This is a county that is pretty competitive, all things considered. Biden won it by less than a point. Trump very narrowly won it in 2016. I think Oz does win this county relatively by about, like, 2 points or so, because Oz is going to do pretty well here. It's a pretty suburban county. It's a very white county, and there's a decent sizable Hispanic population in this county as well as Monroe. We'll get to that in a second, though. I think Oz does pretty well with Hispanics, and he also just does decently with Republican voters there in suburban types. I think Oz makes gains here and wins Northampton County by about 2 points or so. And I forgot to shift Bucks County, actually. I think Oz also wins Bucks County by about 1 point or so. By about 1, yeah. Oz probably wins Bucks by about 1 point, because like I said, as we saw there, it was very white, and as we saw, like as we can see here, it shifted heavily to Joe Biden. But these are pretty much in line with the national environment. These places, all no matter where you go in Philadelphia, D plus 8, D plus 5, D plus 7, D plus 8. They're all pretty much the same shift. And I think we're going to see the same thing only for Oz, because Oz does have a lot of appeal to these types of voters. Dr. Oz actually recently launched a blitz of ads in the Philadelphia markets, these same counties in the same part of the state, which is really attacking Fetterman on crime, taxation, and inflation. And it's a pretty solid ad. It is also running it on CNN, MSNBC. Oz is really making a play for these voters, and I think it's going to pay off, because Fetterman's really just chilling in Pittsburgh and trying to appeal to the Union voters, and I think that'll get him some votes. But the vast majority of votes, as we're going to see here, size of lead is in Philadelphia. I mean, there's not a whole lot of votes in this part of the state. Well, there are a decent amount of votes in the Philadelphia area, and I think is going to be Oz's strong suit. He's going to do very well in these counties, just because that's where he's been campaigning, that's where he's from, and that's where his ads and his rhetoric really appeals to. So I think Oz does do pretty well in the Philadelphia area and shifts the race a little bit to the right. Lehigh County, home to Allentown. This used to be a very white working class area. It used to be very unionized, very manufacturing area, kind of an outlier compared to the rest of this area. However, Allentown has recently gotten a lot more Republican, a lot more suburban, a lot more college educated, a lot more wealthy, and now the industry kind of left. It's kind of been gentrified. Gentrification has occurred there with a lot of more, I guess you'd say, affluent people moving into the area. I think Oz still does well there. I don't think he's going to lose as poorly, but I think than as Trump did. I think he makes gains there, because like I said, this is an area that Fetterman probably would have done well in maybe like 30 years ago, but now this area is pretty suburban, pretty white, pretty college educated. I think Oz does a little bit better there. I think he still loses it, but I think he makes it pretty close. I think he only loses it by maybe like 2 or so. Let's see, how big of a shift to the left did it take? It shifted about 2 points, so maybe he loses by like a little bit more. Let's see. I think Oz probably loses by about 4 points. Yeah, that seems about right. And then now we're gonna come up here to Monroe County. This is a county that, like I said, is pretty it's similar to the rest of these counties. A lot of this whole area, this whole part of the state, is took a huge shift to the left. It's pretty suburban, pretty college educated, pretty affluent, relatively wealthy. And I think Oz is going to do very well there. Oz campaigned quite a bit in Monroe. It took a pretty big shift to the left because Joe Biden is from that part of the state. I think Oz does a little bit better here in Monroe County. I think he wins it by like I don't think he wins it, but I think he probably only loses by about like 2 or so. I think he gets Fetterman very close in this county. I think he only loses by about 2. Like I said, not a whole lot to say there. It did take a huge shift to the left. Trump very narrowly. Trump came this close to winning in 2016. He could not, and Biden won it pretty handily in 2020. And I think Oz is pretty well with those like suburban voters, like he is going to do in all these counties here. We're going to come up to Scranton. This is the only county in the Philadelphia area I think Fetterman might do decently in, is Lackawanna County, home to Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is a county that is, it's where Joe Biden's hometown is. It's still relatively unionized. It still votes pretty Democratic, but it did shift. It did shift some of the areas to Donald Trump. And if you look at national environment, it only shifted like a few points. Some of these areas took huge shift to the left. Don't get me wrong, but the county itself, I think, only took a pretty big shift actually. Yeah, about 4 points. But that's pretty much in line with the national environment. Most places shifted about 4 points to the right. So I think Oz probably does about a point better there. Pretty much the same. I don't know. I think because Biden did better there than most Democrats do. I think Oz probably loses by like 6.5 or so. Makes it closer than normal, but doesn't win it. Come up here. These counties up here, Wayne and Pike. These are traditionally Republican counties. They're pretty suburb. They're a mix of suburbs and rural areas. I think Oz is pretty well here. I think he maybe gets like 35. Wins this county maybe like 21. So small gains there, but he still does make them. And then these counties here, kind of the exurbs of Philadelphia. These are areas that, if we look at the shift from 2016, Democrats had made pretty big gains in some of these counties like Cumberland, Northampton, Montour, Luzerne. These are counties that like Fetterman probably isn't going to do well in. These are, like I said, these are the more suburban counties. I'm not going to go into them super in depth. Like these counties, there just aren't that many votes there, and they're not as well known. But they're still relatively suburban counties, and they really only took a huge shift to the left because Biden was on the ballot, like I said. And however, Trump did still win a lot of these counties. And I think these are areas that Oz does do pretty well in. These are the more, I guess you'd say, traditional Republican-leaning counties. Like they'll vote red no matter what. I think Oz does pretty well there. We're going to take these counties here, shift them a couple of points to the right, because I think Oz does pretty well here. R plus 3 to flip the counties. And just like that, if even if Fetterman makes decent gains across the more conservative parts of the state and the Pittsburgh and its exurbs, if Oz just does a little bit better in the Philadelphia suburbs, I think I may be underestimating Oz in some of these counties actually. Oz make even bigger gains here, but if Oz just does decently in Philadelphia, even if Fetterman takes away a lot of the Republican votes, or Republicans don't turn out in some of the rural areas, if Oz just does decently in Philadelphia, he still wins this race by about 0.26. And Oz is running a perfect campaign for the Philadelphia area. The polls have began to make this race seem a little bit more competitive, and because of that, I do think that Dr. Oz is going to pull off this race. Although it's going to be very close, and a lot of it depends on just how much the vote Fetterman takes away from Oz in the rural areas, and how much gain Oz does make in the Philadelphia suburbs. But even if Fetterman does very well, like we've mapped it out here, even if Fetterman does do pretty well in the rural parts of Pennsylvania and the more traditional Republican-leaning areas and the more working-class types, if Oz just does decently with suburban voters, which all things point to the fact that he will, a lot of these voters, they voted for Trump in 2016, or they at least were open to it. I mean, they only shifted to Biden. They shifted to Biden because, well, they were Trump and Biden voters. They just didn't like Trump. And if Oz even just does half as well, even if he just does this well, I think I'm underestimating Oz here, but even if Oz does this well, he still wins this race by a very slim margin. So at this point, I think that although Fetterman is leading in the polls, Dr. Oz does have a very easy path to victory. He just has to do what I just mapped out right here. And as we saw with the demographics and saw with the trends, it is certainly possible. So with that, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed and made it this far, I appreciate that. I know this is a longer video, so if you made it this far, I really appreciate it, and I appreciate even more if you liked and subscribed. Thank you for watching.